What's going on, YouTube? Thank you for tuning in to another video. Today I have a very interesting topic. I have been asked quite a bit in the last few months that I have been making videos. I have been asked, I have been had discussions with people, and a lot of the times the topics that have come up with are just questions on how to go about doing magic, like what do I do here, or what do I do there. And then I've actually been involved in a few groups, Facebook groups and otherwise, where there's a lot of discussions on what to do in magic, what not to do in magic, things that you should avoid, pitfalls, XYZ, this mumbo jumbo. So I wanted to make this video guide, and it's basically what it is the ultimate beginner's intro guide to magic. Here's where it gets cool. So, in order to do magic, you don't have to have all this crazy stuff that you may think you may need. For instance, I'll actually get into the specifics in a little bit, but for all intents and purposes, let's say whatever you may think you know about magic, or that you want to know about magic, go ahead and forget it. Do yourself a favor by taking whatever preconceived notions that you may have about magic or the occult, by taking that and removing it, throwing it away, and you basically allow yourself an open mind and an open space to work with, and you allow a new path, a new way to move forward. One piece of information that I have found is that practical magic can and will work without theoretical knowledge. What does that mean? Does that mean that I don't need to understand the ins and the outs of what it means to be working with certain spirits or sigils or concepts? I don't need to know, and I don't need to comprehend the basis or the history or the theory behind them for it to actually work in my life? That's what it is. In a nutshell, there are some certain books that I'm about to show you, and they're all from the same group. And these books, they make it such that you don't need to know anything about the concepts, the theories, the practices, the principles behind why they work. They just give you practical, workable magic. First one that I ever worked with, Wealth Magic. I have video series that I am releasing on each working as I get through them. I'm actually behind on the third working. Forgive me, I have to make a video on that, but I'm actually making a video on each working of how my experience has gone in this Wealth Magic book. There's no theory, there's no explanation of why, there's no explanation of what each working does. It's just a step-by-step instruction. Look how thin it is. It's thin. And this thin book, in 80 pages, actually a little less because there's a pronunciation guide at the end, 75 pages. In this 75-page book, it's a 5.5 month to 6 month course on a bunch of different workings, and it doesn't tell you any theory. This magical cash book, in the middle of working on this with a special friend, and we are continuing to do this magical cash book repeatedly in succession, and we're going to keep asking for higher and higher and higher amounts. There's no explanation on Nitika, the spirit that's being used. There's no explanation on what it is, maybe like a paragraph. But everything else in this 47-page book is just pure practical application. Get started on the magic right away. Then we have one by a different guy. He's actually not in the same group as the other books. This one also has practical magic. I like the way it's written. And then we have, and I'm going to speed this up, Sigils of Power, Archangels of Magic, as well as Angels of Magic. These all don't involve the nuances that go into the magic. And you know what I noticed? People tend to get stuck on wanting to learn everything, the ins and the outs, and the hows and the whats and the whys, people get stuck on that. And instead of practicing magic, they're like trying to come up with all this theoretical stuff and trying to piece that together and using that as a framework in how they're going to conduct their magic, because they're afraid that they may not be doing it right. Or they're afraid there's some kind of fear preventing them from actually going forward and taking the step and leaping, jumping right in. And then there's nothing to fear. Just get started. That's like one of the most fundamental things that you can learn as a beginner to magic, is that don't get stuck on wanting to learn how to do it. Just start doing it. You'll learn as you go. You don't start out a professional at anything in life. You start out as a beginner. And it's the same thing with this. You start out as a beginner. And as you keep working, you keep working, and you keep working, you get better and better. Here's a concept that I get seen talked about a lot, or it gets tossed around a lot. And the reason it gets tossed around is because of some commonly held misconceptions about how the universe works. Karma isn't what you may think it is. And I don't say that lightly. I come from a Hindu background, right? In Hinduism, karma is a big thing. In fact, a lot of our practical society is revolved around the fear of what will happen if I take a certain decision. If I make a decision and I decide to perform an action in life, I have to think well before taking that action, because there could be a repercussion to that in the future. And that's just how my whole cultural background and generations upon generations who have raised my ancestors, my grandfathers, grandmother, and my parents, and then down to me, all that cultural education that's passed down to family members through just living life, like the stuff that doesn't get talked about but gets passed down to generations. Karma is deeply embedded in me, the concept anyway. But I found that it's not what I have been raised to believe, or that is commonly understood. It's not like for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. Now that's physics, granted, and that is a very real concept in spirituality and metaphysics. But if I do something bad, does that mean something bad will happen to me? Who's the arbiter of bad? Huh? Like, who makes the decision? Who's the final judge in what is good or bad or right and wrong? There's a lot of variables that could happen to influence this line of right and wrong. And you don't know who is the judge of what's right and what's wrong. And with that being the case, how can an action that I take be considered right or wrong by anybody? And if it is considered right or wrong, who's the one that makes the final judgment call on that? It's a real question that you need to ask yourself. And it's a question that I've asked myself, and it is a concept that I've discovered to not be true based on my own practice using magic. That's not to say that I do anything bad or good inherently. And that kind of segues me into my next point, which is light and dark are inherent and erroneous. Inherently erroneous. And are used to divide. So you have the two opposite sides of the spectrum. Here we go again, like we have a line. We have the duality, right, of light and dark. We have some people who claim to only work with the light. We have some people who claim to only work with the dark. And in my opinion, it's crap. It's full of crap. Like, what is dark? What is light? What is left? What is right? It's just two opposites of the same thing, right? But then, people who talk about dark magic, why are they arbiters of what is considered to be dark? Why do they get to choose what it means to be dark? All that's crap, and it's irrelevant and does not matter when it comes to practical working magic. If I have a desire for something and I do what I want, and I call on some spirits to receive what I want, how is that dark or light? So, forget about that whole light and dark, good and bad. Forget about that, because it's not true. It has no place in magic. There's another topic. To make it simple, And here's where a lot of power comes from, is your own hands, your own two hands. And I'm right-handed, so I write with my right hand. And the reason I say that is because that is how you should actually write all your rituals. Granted, it doesn't really say that in any of these books that you should write down the rituals, but I find that rewriting something in English with my own handwriting gives it a lot more power. My dad actually instilled that in me very, very, very early on, 5 years old, 6 years old. He would say that if you want to learn something, even if it's written in your textbook, write it down, write it out again. And by writing it out, I'm actually putting my own energy into the pen or pencil and into that paper. And when I see it reflected back at me, it's my handwriting. And it gives it a lot more power. I'm able to learn it a lot easier because I have actually invested some of my energy and time into learning it by doing that, rather than looking at it and trying to memorize the image of what it was. And maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm just not a visual learner. I'm a practical learner. Anyway, I think experience is the greatest teacher. It is the best teacher. So write your rituals by hand. That's a very, very, very useful concept to remember. If you find a ritual in a book that you want to adapt and use for yourself, rewrite it on a piece of paper. And when it comes to sigils, in a book such as this, Sigils of Power actually recommends that you use the book, and it actually recommends that you use what they have provided. And if you have an electronic copy, you can actually use it right out of the ebook form. The ebook using a tablet or a phone. But I find, interestingly enough, that redrawing the sigils and encoding my own power, energy into that sigil, it gives it a lot more power. Again, for the same reason that handwriting does. And here's a really good and one of my favorite bullet points. Paraphernalia, not required. Fancy altars, candles, big, elaborate forms of worshiping these entities that don't want to be worshipped, absolutely not needed. You know, I actually live with another person, right, who doesn't know most of what I do, right? And therefore, it would be weird for me to have a bunch of worshipping items in my room. Good thing they're not required. Good thing they do not present a prerequisite. There's nowhere, anywhere, that has practical information that says that you need these fancy and elaborate altars. Most of them, most of the rituals, most of the spirits you can work with, extremely easy, with just a pen and a paper, some thought in your heart, right? And this brings me to my final point. My final point is do magic and then live your life. The most beautiful thing about the magic is that once you perform the ritual, you go and live your life. But you have to live your life not expecting for the result. The result will come automatically, and you will look back on it later on down the line. You will think to yourself, oh, magic must have worked. But the trick is that you can't think about it when you go about your daily life. If you obsess over the fact that you're into all this magic and power and all that stuff, like, it actually degrades your results. You know, the more you think about it when you're not actually doing the ritual, the more disservice you're doing to yourself. It's really not complicated. It's real easy stuff. Super easy stuff. It's practical. It's easy. Just get started. Just get started. I hope this was like a good intro. I know I didn't cover everything that I wanted to cover, but 15 minutes is quite a long time for me to talk about anything, really. But yeah, go out there and try it. I showed you all my books. If you want a good place to start, you got a bunch of good places right here. So anyway, thank you for watching one of my videos, and peace out.